9.2 Features of Roman society, classes, government, the economy, and religion. The elements of Roman society and the slaves placed in it were bound to change over time, although there were some features that remained the same. These included the importance of the familia and its patriarchal nature, controlled by a leading male, the significance of being freeborn and having Roman citizenship, multiple social hierarchies that often overlapped, so that a person's position in one might be different than in another. An example of this was the patron-client relationship, known as clientele, one of the most long-lasting features of Roman society and of considerable influence in politics. In those important social networks, a patron could himself be a client of a more powerful patron, and his clients could have multiple patrons. Later, when Rome acquired an overseas provinces, officials and generals became the patrons of very large groups of foreign people. Tim G. Perkins and Arthur J. Pomeroy in Roman social history say it was essential in Rome to fit into social groups in order to gain acceptance from one's peers and to facilitate patronage connections with those more powerful. And there's a diagram that you can have a look at there in your books. Roma's society was divided into following groups: freeborn or ingenue. Uh, Within this group, there had always been hierarchies based on one's ancestry, patrician, nobles, or plebeian, commoners, rank based on wealth and political privilege, senators and equestrians. Citizenship itself was divided into various grades, in which some people had only partial citizenship rights. Some communities had what were called Latin rights. They could not vote, but their leading magistrates could become full citizens. Gender. Women, though citizens, could not vote or hold office, and so were always lower in the hierarchy. The form of Roman marriage, called connubium, required that both partners had to be a citizen or civis. A Roman's legal status affected her son's citizenship. Freed men and women, or liberti. These were people who had been slaves but who had gained their freedom by manumission. Any child born of freedmen were classified as freeborn. A freed slave was the libertas or libertas of his former master, who became his patron or patroness. The two had mutual obligations to each other within a traditional patronage system. Freedmen could vote and participate in politics, but could not run for office or be admitted to the ruling class. During the empire, many freedmen had roles in the imperial bureaucracy and the emperor's household. Others got involved in commerce and became extremely wealthy and influential. Slaves or servi, those legally enslaved. Although they had certain rights, they were generally regarded in Roman society as little more than property. In the 2nd century BCE, it was recorded that it appears that the law places in the same category with slaves animals which are included under the head of cattle and are kept in herds. Roman government. The Romans did not have a written constitution, but rather one that evolved over time. In 264 BCE, the republican government had virtually acquired the form it was to retain, although it did go through some further changes in the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. Its administrative structure included the Senate, magistrates, and the people's assemblies. The Senate was a purely advisory body, but in practice it became the real governing body in Republican Rome. Its power was not based on laws, but on custom, precedent, and the prestige of its members. Its power increased during the wars against Carthage, and its supremacy in the state became firmly established during the 2nd century BCE. The members of this body made up the ruling class of Rome. A magistrate was an elected government official occupying a position of power and prestige, both of which increased with the rank of his office. The two highest magistrates were the consuls, commanded the army, conducted chief elections, presided over meetings of the Senate, and implemented Senate decisions. Praetors, supreme civil judges of Rome, sometimes commanded an army, could summon the assembly of the centuries, and introduce legislation. These magistrates had what was called imperium. Also, only those who held these positions could lead an army and be sent to the provinces as governors. There were three popular assemblies of the people, or comitia, summoned to gather in a particular way for particular functions. After the chaos of civil wars during the 1st century BCE was brought to an end, Octavian, or Augustus, believed that centralized power in the hands of one man was the only solution for the future, because he wanted assumption of this power by himself to appear constitutional and to share the workload of running the empire with the Senate. He adopted the title of Princeps, or first citizen. However, he kept supreme power in his own hands by controlling the army. The economy. Ancient Rome was an agrarian and slave-based economy whose main concern was feeding the vast numbers of citizens and legionaries who populated the Mediterranean region. Trade, supplemented by small-scale industrial production and mining, also dominated Rome's economy. Again, T. G. Parkins and Arthur L. Pomeroy say, wheat consumed as bread or broth was a staple of the ancient diet. Yet because of the size of Rome, conveniently set at 1 million people, maintaining grain supplies year-round required considerable effort. In 57 BCE, the new post of Curia Annone, or curator of the grain supply, was created and bestowed on Pompey, those eligible for a grain handout were registered and provided with regular supplies. Under Augustus, the number eligible were limited to 200,000, but food shortages still occurred, often leading to riots and even leading to threats against the emperor himself. Suetonius in Claudius writes, Claudius also always interested himself in the proper upkeep of the city and the regular arrival of grain supplies. Once, after a series of bad harvests had caused the scarcity of grain, a mob stopped Claudius in the forum and pelted him so hard with curses and stale crusts that he had difficulty regaining the palace. As a result, he took all possible steps to import grain, even during the winter months, ensuring merchants against the loss of their ships in stormy weather, which guaranteed them a good return on their ventures, and offering a large bounty for every new grain transport ship proportionate to its tonnage. Strabo in geography says Polybius mentions the silver mines at New Carthage in Spain, and says that they are very large. that they are about 20 stades from the city and cover an area of 400 stades in circumference, and that 40,000 workers stay there. In time, they brought into the Roman state each day 25,000 drachmas. Roman religion. Religion in Rome involved the correct performance of ritual, sacrifice, and prayer. Only when the proper procedures in both a state and household level were observed would gods answer their prayers. The state religion, which centered on a triad of gods, Jupiter, protector of the states, Juno, protector of women, and Minerva, patron of craftsmen, represented a special branch of the administration. Religion was subordinated to the interests of the state and played an important role or part in political decisions. The priests, who were usually active politicians such as magistrates or senators, belonged to a number of colleges. For example, the augurs were responsible for divination or taking the auspices. These auspices took several forms: the observation of natural phenomena, the studying of the vital organs of animals, and taking notes of portents, unusual events such as earthquakes and eclipses. These could all be used to influence political events, such as the timing of holding an election or going to war. Changes were made to state religion as Rome's empire grew. 1. The influence of Greek culture resulted in Roman gods being identified with their Greek counterparts. Jupiter with Zeus, Juno with Hera, and Minerva with Athena, and so on. 2. The worship of foreign gods, such as the cult of Dionysus, introduced from Greece, Isis, introduced from Egypt, and Mithras, introduced by soldiers returning from the East, became popular in Rome. 3. With the advent of the empire under Augustus, a cult of Caesar worship, which took the form of cults of Rome and Augustus, and Rome and the deified Julius, became common in the provinces and was a way to unite all provincials in loyalty to Rome. All Romans had their own household shrines at which they worshipped Janus, the spirit of the doorway, Vesta, the guardian of the hearth, the Lares, guardians of the field and family property, the Penates, guardian spirits of the store chamber, and Genius, the male procreative spirit. A family's ancestors, represented by wax masks as keepers of the family lineage, were also kept in the house.